What's up guys, Ryan here with Training Training, and today's question is, which is the best approach for fat loss? Clean eating, or if it fits your macros, also known as IIFYM for short. I'm going to give you the pros and cons of each, and by the end of the video, you're going to know which method is best for losing fat fast. And the answer might surprise you, so you're going to want to stick around to the end. Before we get into the pros and cons of each, let's talk about what each of these methods are. First, we will talk about clean eating. Clean eating is kind of self-explanatory. The focus is on eating foods that are considered to be clean. And which foods that are considered to be clean is going to depend on who you ask, but in general, we're talking your fruits, your veggies, your lean meats, your low-fat dairy products, eggs, nuts, seeds, whole grains, stuff like that. Now let's talk about if it fits your macros. The first question is, what is a macro? And the term macro is simply short for macronutrient. Macronutrient being something that our bodies need in large quantities in order to survive. And your macros are proteins, carbs, and fat. 1 gram of protein contains 4 calories. 1 gram of carbohydrate contains 4 calories. And 1 gram of fat contains 9 calories. The premise of IIFYM is that you are allotted a certain number of proteins, carbs, and fats per day, and as long as you hit these numbers, you can eat whatever you want. And if you might have noticed, if you are counting your macros, you are also counting your calories by default. And this is something that we will come back to here in a little bit. Now for the pros and cons of each. Let's talk about clean eating first, and we will start with the pros. 1, you're going to be getting lots of fruits and veggies. 2, you're likely going to be getting lots of fiber, depending on which fruits and veggies that you're eating. And 3, you're likely going to be eating a lot of micronutrient-dense foods. Now for the cons. 1, clean eating promotes an exclusive dieting approach rather than an inclusive dieting approach. And what I mean by this is the focus of clean eating is that you are eating only these clean foods and excluding these other foods. And because certain foods are viewed as bad, when these foods are included in the diet, it can lead to people thinking that they are bad because they've included these foods in their diet. Instead, I would encourage you to focus on including mostly clean foods and then saving yourself a little room at the end for some treats so that you keep your sanity while you're dieting. The other and bigger con of the clean eating diet is that it focuses solely on food quality without regard to food quantity. And the amount of calories consumed is the number one determinant of whether or not you're going to lose or gain weight. If you are eating more calories than you burn, you will not lose weight, period. Let me reiterate this. It is physically impossible to lose weight if you are eating more calories than you burn. Now, the foods that are considered to be clean typically are lower in calories, meaning that many people can and often do lose weight while following clean eating. But since you're not tracking your intake, there is no guarantee that you will lose weight because you could overeat on clean foods, which would lead to you gaining weight rather than losing weight. This brings me to the pros of IIFYM. As I mentioned earlier, you are tracking your macros, and if you're tracking your macros, you are tracking your calories by default. So you have the most important part of fat loss covered already. What I didn't mention earlier is that the way you distribute your calories amongst the 3 macronutrients is the second most important thing for fat loss. So by doing IIFYM, you are covering the 2 most important things for fat loss by default. Another benefit of IIFYM is that you get to eat whatever you want as long as it hits those numbers, so you don't have to feel restricted and like you aren't allowed certain foods like with clean eating. Now for the cons. Tracking macros can seem a little bit intimidating to people who are not as familiar with nutrition. But don't worry, if this is you, stick around to the end of the video and I will help you out with that. Now the other con is actually one of the pros that we just talked about. You can fill your macros with whatever foods you want. This isn't a bad thing in and of itself, but the issue is that IIFYM was really born out of rebellion towards clean eating. And what started out as including a little bit of junk food in a fat loss diet quickly evolved into how much junk food can I fit without going over these numbers. Which in this case, you're sacrificing all of the benefits of clean eating. And I've actually been on both ends of the spectrum. I started out before I knew anything about nutrition, before the classes, before the certifications or any of that. I was reading the fitness magazines and I thought that I had to eat these specific foods if I wanted to gain muscle and be lean. And by the time that I started learning about macros and calories and all of that, I was so tired of being restricted from the clean eating side of things that I wanted to go all the way to the other end of the spectrum, and I became one of those people who was just fitting as much junk as possible into my diet just because I could. And I did get bigger and I did get leaner, but at the same time I was getting sick more often. I was having a lot of stomach issues at the time, as well as just generally not feeling that great most of the time. Then I switched to an approach called flexible dieting. And flexible dieting essentially is IIFYM, except for there's a focus on ensuring that you include enough clean foods, you know, the foods we mentioned earlier, your fruits, your veggies, your lean meats, stuff like that. But you save a small portion of your calories, I would say up to 20% of those calories, for the foods that I like to call fun foods, which is basically just your junk food. So to answer the original question, IIFYM is technically superior to clean eating for fat loss because you're controlling your calories and you're controlling your macros, which, like I said, is the two most important factors for achieving fat loss, but it can oftentimes lead to eating too much junk food and not enough whole, fibrous, micronutrient dense foods, which can sacrifice your health. So the answer is, I actually would recommend neither in this case. I would recommend flexible dieting. Flexible dieting fixes the pitfalls of both clean eating and IIFYM without sacrificing the good parts of each. Flexible dieting also promotes an inclusive dieting mindset versus an exclusive dieting mindset, like I mentioned earlier. Your focus is on getting enough good, clean, minimally processed, micronutrient dense foods. I would say 80+% of your overall intake coming from these foods, and then purposely saving a small portion of your calories for fun foods. So now that you know which approach to use, you probably want to know how to set up the diet. And I did say earlier that if you were a beginner and were not so sure about counting macros, that I would help you out with that. I have a video that will teach you exactly how to set up your diet step by step. And if you want to watch that video, you can click the card that is going to pop up right now, or you can look in the description box below and it will be there as well. And that's going to be it for this video. If you liked it, toss it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content like this, hit the subscribe button below and hit the notification bell so that you'll be the first to know when I upload a new video. If you found this information helpful and think that others will benefit from it as well, please give this video a share on social media. It helps us out more than you know. I will be back next week with another fat loss topic. As always, God bless you and your family, and I'll see you next week. Let me reiterate this. Let me reiterate this. Oh my goodness.